the community came together to make that investment in me, to elect me as mayor, for me to go through the discovery process, to overcome the obstacles, to put the team in place. And tonight, as we talk more about these issues and get into a deeper discussion about them, what I will ultimately ask you is to continue that investment in me and to continue to support and challenge me as your mayor.
Okay. Thank you both for being here. We want to give you time to give us a full answer to the questions. Going to ask you to keep your answers to 2.5 minutes so we can get through as many questions as possible. When you see me kind of waving my hand down there, okay, it's time to start to wrap it up, all right? Jack, I'm going to start with you. And normally I don't do one-sided questions with this, but a question that I heard very early and have heard a number of times that people would like to have answered. You were not part of Mayor Snow's original staff, but you did come in as Director of Infrastructure and Development for the city. Weren't there a long time? He's just hit 3 years. You've come and gone in that time. Why did you leave that position?
Well, I really felt, Eric, and it came out in the paper, because when I got to the position, I came in and I basically said with my resume, I was a change manager, I was a change kind of person, that's what I did. And when I got there and I actually looked at what changes needed to be made, first I had some areas that, we had over management. Basically, we had a very small section with multiple layers of supervision. And when you have something like that, that's something where you want to go to more of a flat level management. And with flat level, I was trying to basically take my 2 divisions and break out a 3rd division, which was the building commissioner and the inspectors, so I could focus on actually trying to fix the community and get the code enforcement going and moving at a really rapid pace. However, at that time, I was told that, no, I shouldn't do that. They did not want that done. And if you hire me and I say I'm a change agent, that I'm coming in to kind of develop things and make things happen, that's pretty much what everybody should expect. But when that wasn't the way, basically at that point, and since it was in the paper, I told my wife at that time, I said, we're probably going to finish out a year here, and then we'll, do what we have to do. I told her at that time, and this came early in my career. When I was getting out of the military, somebody said, you've been public servant all your life. What are you going to do? I said, well, honestly, I think the next logical step is to run for public office, because I think I can make a great public servant, because I really think about the public. I think about what's going on, and I actually engage with people. That's what my management skill is negotiating and engaging with people, talking to them, finding out and empathizing with their position, and looking at how I can kind of try and improve that. So that's pretty much the size of it. I just saw opportunity. When I first went to the Democratic meeting, I put down there that I planned to run for election. So that was just something that was already in me. So this was the next available election time period that I would have came in. Me and my wife put together a plan and a strategy, and that's how I work. I mean, pretty much we put together the plan and strategy, and it went off honestly like clockwork. We met with people, we initiated on a specific date, we knew what date things were coming up, we already knew kind of what our budget was around that, because I always plan logistics first to figure out what you're going to spend before you're going in, and always get wife's approval. That's important. So,
so you've always had a plan to run for mayor. It wasn't precipitated by what happened with you leaving the city.
No. I've been always involved with being a public servant. I mean, honestly, a lot of my missions, even when I was in the military, they weren't always. And people sometimes see military and they think combat related. But we did a lot of humanitarian missions in Albania, and Kosovo. We rescued thousands of people and we had a really small unit that we did that with. It wasn't a large force, but basically we would go in and build communities up. And that was a matter of jumping in or coming in on helicopter or whatever we needed to do to get that area and make sure people were safe and that they had the proper living conditions for the areas that we did set up.
I know that personnel matters are not something you probably want to get into in public, but you had somebody come in and you ran knowing that there needed to be some changes made in the city, that the structure wasn't quite right. Why was Jack allowed to leave? Why was this not something that might have been able to be massaged and worked out?
Well, I'm certainly not going to dive into the details of what is otherwise a private matter, you know, if Jack decides to discuss that, that is his decision.
Okay.
As the mayor, just by policy, categorically, I'm not going to get into the details of why any separation occurs between the administration and anybody working there. However, what I will tell you is that upon coming in as mayor, my first goal was to build a collaborative, progressive team that could facilitate each of the departments and serve this city and accomplish these goals that I was talking about in my opening statements. We knew a lot of the work at hand, and we knew what had to be done. And so I started, first of all, I put together a leadership development team. I think we've talked about that before. That leadership development team is comprised of 10 or 11 people close to government, citizens, former elected officials, and that has helped us vet some very quality leadership. Once that leadership is in place, then it's constant monitoring from there. You have to be in the position, and you have to be performing to serve the community and working as a team. And so that's just how we operate day to day. It's how we've been operating, how we'll continue to operate. So I'm thrilled with the team we have in place, and I'm thrilled with the work that's been able to be accomplished and the mission that we're setting out for ourselves ahead.
Okay. This is a primary election, so some specifics about what you're going to change in the budget and things of that nature. One of you will hopefully be back in the fall. We'll have this discussion with Jamie Lopeman, who is the Republican candidate for mayor, and then we'll get a little bit more specific. Some of these are going to be just kind of feel and give people a general idea of where you want to go. Knowing that this answer might change in 6 months, can you give me 3 things that you think are best about this city? 3 positives about the
Would you like
city.
me to go first?
We're going to start with you.
Oh my gosh. Well, number one would be the people, without a doubt. The people of the city. I mean, I've lived here my entire life, and so my life wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for the people of the city that raised me, the former classmates and former coworkers and people that I just see day to day. The second best thing about the city, and there's so many lenses you could filter that through. So that's a tough question, Eric, because if you filter it through the economic development lens, you start talking about its proximity in the workforce. If you filter it through the community lens, you start talking about our beautiful parks and the beautiful old buildings that we have. So I'm not going to be unfair and just go on this. When you ask the mayor the best things about a city, you're going to get a long answer.
And you get 3.
I'm going to say people's number one, and I'll leave it at that and talk about we have good economic opportunities because of our proximity, and we just have a beautiful culture and history. I think I might have said 4 in there, and I apologize. I give Jack an extra one.
We'll let you go.
Yeah.
Well, mine are based on basically my platform that I've already published. And the reason I published it was because that's what I truly believe. The architecture of Richmond is just a valued piece of our community. I mean, it can't be denied. It's been here forever. And it really is one of the things that I feel is just, significant for Richmond. I also think the second thing is education, which I think we've got 5 universities here. And I think that just the incorporation and being a college level town is basically, it just really fits as far as Richmond. I mean, this should be really thriving. And that's the direction I want to push it to, is to thrive based on that purpose of bringing people from pre-kindergarten all the way through 14 years, basically all the way into college, and not go away to college. We got 5 universities here. Stay in Richmond, build that next level of our future. Basically, going into the future, we need to work on our technical skills. We need to work on our plumbers, electricians. And if we do things that can kind of bring the high school students into that grasp, the freshmen and sophomores that are already in the colleges here, to find value in staying in Richmond, we'll start to build that next level. And then the third thing I find is economic, because business is my third focus, is basically looking at Richmond. I mean, literally, it's faster to get to the airport in Indianapolis from Richmond than it is from living in Indianapolis. So, I mean, the proximity to 3 large metropolitan areas, Cincinnati, Dayton, and Indianapolis, the I-70 and US 40 going right by. I mean, we really are just an epicenter of what I consider just a good strategic point to kind of touch those areas, and also market Richmond as a place that you might want to live outside that metropolitan area and live in Richmond and, have a nicer drive to work, less traffic, better places to be. I mean, we could just really build this city up, but those are my 3, and it's going to stay my 3. I mean, that's the consistency of it, is basically housing, education, and businesses.
Okay.
Not just big businesses, small business. I mean, there's the big business model is there. Mm-hmm. However, the 3,000 job factories are not going to come to Richmond because there's no really 3,000 job factories out there anymore. The new marketing strategy for factories is you're going to have 150 jobs and a lot of robotics that come in with that. And that's what Richmond has to really guide itself. If we plan to go into the future, we've got to look at maybe the next phase of Richmond is to be an Amazon marketing area where we service Indianapolis, Dayton, and Cincinnati. We've got to look at our strategy beyond what we've done. We can't replace Elder Beerman with Elder Beerman. We need to replace Elder Beerman with something new, something novel. Maybe even just something like a e-sports center for kids and have like healthy vending machines in there so they can have a batting cage inside, they can play video games, we can exercise a climbing wall. I mean, you could really exercise getting the children of our community having a place to go, but also a safe and healthy place to go where you could have activities that encourage physical fitness as well as technical skills, robotics, engineering, things like that.
Follow up?
Sorry, I went over.
You're good. Don't worry about it. You're watching the InFocus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with Dave Snow, Jack Cruse, Democrat candidates in the primary for mayor. Let's flip on the other side of that. Top 3 things that you want to change if you're elected or re-elected. Let's start with you.
Well, like I said, if I stay with the same focus, and the one thing I want to change is how we account for our housing. I mean, these are some incredible buildings and facilities, but the problem I see is actually even greater than just the localized code enforcement. We've got some really bad actors that live outside the city of Richmond that let property sit here forever. And we need to look at what kind of legal actions we could take to stop that. So I think that's a problem. That's one of the biggest things that I think, because it's not, when it happens to an individual house, that's one thing, but when it happens to a very large building that's on a main thoroughfare to the city, it really impacts the city. And it causes a depressing atmosphere, and we don't want depressing atmospheres. We want to emphasize what is positive about the community. And then when I say as far as education, I mean the one problem is actually the opioid crisis and health-related issue crises. And education in that area could increase. I mean, we could become a lot more focused on some of the things that may be problem areas. When you look at possibly even the methadone program, do we have people from outside Richmond coming in here to, use that program? Do we need to look at how long that program exists? So there's an education piece, but also releasing or easing the stigma on the people that have been affected, because honestly, in some cases, you don't know, you can't say what that man's walked until you walk in his shoes. And when you really think about it, that you can't kind of put that stigma on them that they're just useless and we're to throw them away, we're just not going to work with them. We've got to look for ways to get them back into and leading into business, getting them into employment. Belden has a great program, Pathways to Employment, which I think is very important for a community like ours. We need more businesses that are focusing on things like that to get where they're moving out of that stigma. They come out of, their process or whatever happens, and that gives them an opportunity to start to build their lives, and that would encourage and embolden them. So it still stays with my same focus areas, is that our housing is basically it's our best and our worst. Education, it's our best asset, and we've got some problems with it. And business, I mean, that's one of the things, we're in a great location for it, but we've got to get businesses to want to stay. We need to incentivize that or look at ways that we can get small businesses, because even Warren Buffett pulled out of Walmart. We can't depend on big corporations like that to save Richmond. I mean, we need jobs, but maybe we need to look at what some of these are going to be smaller market jobs, or maybe, like I said, an Amazon warehouse, things like that. Oh.
Okay. Top 3 things you want to change?
Yeah, I think Jack did touch on some good points in there. And if I had to talk about 3 things, the most effective way I could do that would be to create sort of 3 buckets and 3 categories. And I won't go too deep into each one, but I think the first category would be people and advocacy for people. And that goes along that entire pipeline. We have to do more in early childhood development. I think that's very important. I think we deal with a lot of problems 20, 25 years too late. And so we have to do more to advocate for early childhood development. And then along that pipeline, through education, workforce resources, dealing with poverty, advocating for those that are in substandard housing, and we're working on those elements now. As mayor, I have a seat at the Forward Wayne County table where they are working now to unify those resources and get them moving forward and pursue dollars to invigorate early childhood development. I've taken steps to try to invigorate workforce resource development so that people have access and knowledge about how to access workforce resources. So that's sort of the people bucket, and we could continue to expand through that pipeline. The second one that I would talk about would be the civic pride piece and believing in Richmond and believing in the environment, because it does tie back to the first one. We have to believe in our city. We have to believe that there are open doors here, and so that people are inspired to navigate those workforce resources and to pursue the higher education pieces that we have available. And then the third one is, I would say, continuing to do more to invigorate the heart of our city and our economy as a whole. So I guess it would be people, civic pride and inspiration, and economy would be the three buckets, and I could continue to unpack each one of those and talk more about each one. But I think those would be my three key topics that we need to do more work on as we go forward.
Okay. You're watching the InFocus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11, working with our partners, the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce. Business is on their mind. We asked for questions earlier in the week, and we actually got a few that we're going to get in here, and we are still taking your questions either on YouTube or through Twitter. But our first chat question, if we can put that one up, I think you've both kind of touched on business, and I think this first one does that. What support do you believe the city should provide to local employers that is not currently happening? So you may have some things that you want to unpack. You're going to start with this one.
To local employers. So I'm going to assume that question is centered around, that's a tough question. I guess the question is, how could the city help a company that's trying to bring in more employees or soft skills development? We've had a lot of conversations within the city about invigorating the entrepreneurial pipeline, but that's at the beginning when somebody's trying to start a business.
You've also done some things as far as marketing the downtown area, that type of thing. What could or should the city do to help potential employers? Yeah,
we have done pieces like that. We've invested almost $1,000 per year into marketing for downtown while we're under construction, and to continue shining a spotlight on those businesses. We've also invested in the Hoosier Opportunity website, which gives employers an opportunity to showcase the jobs they have to offer, and gives employees an opportunity, people that want the jobs, if they're unemployed or underemployed, an opportunity to go to that website, learn more about those job openings, and then connect. Last year alone, we saw 30,000 hits to that website, so we know it's being utilized. The other thing that I think is really important in helping employers is connecting people to the workforce resources. I was in this very studio and created a workforce resource video. We have an abundance of workforce resources to help you skill up in the workplace, whether you're unemployed or underemployed. We have, excuse me, Richmond Adult Education, the Excel Center, Manufacturing Matters, Next Level Jobs through IB Tech, through the governor's office. We have Work One. And so I made a workforce resources video. Last I checked on that video, it was at about 20,000 hits. And so I feel like we've done things to help try to invigorate that market, but sitting at the table with the businesses and hearing from them is always a goal of mine. So if there's more that we can be doing, I want to be able to hear that and have a positive impact where I can.
Okay. What support do you believe that the city could or should provide to local employers that is not currently happening?
One thing, and I've thought about this, Eric, is that I really think that when you talk about like the local business, you have to look at kind of what do they need. And I think in some ways when we have a lot of businesses leaving the downtown area, but I don't want to focus on the downtown area, because I think that I've had many business owners from the south side, west side, east side tell me that every time somebody talks about business, all they talk about is the depot or the downtown. And they said, we exist here too, which I agree that we've really got to capture everybody. But I would look at the incentivize pieces that could help business owners. If there's a way that, and I'd have to look at the budget to actually get deep into exactly how the mechanics of that would work. So that's the biggest thing that we have to do. But that's something I would invite business owners to join with as far as a partnership. Looking at the city's economic vitality. But I could think of things, and these are just random things that I could think off the top of my head, is one, incentivizing the downtown. I mean, we work directly with RP&L. Say, for instance, the city said, okay, well, RP&L, let's go ahead and reduce the rate of electricity on Fridays and Saturdays so businesses could stay open longer, and might give them opportunity to make money. keep more employees employed because they're not spending as much money on their utilities. So that's something we could do. We could look at the ADA programs. All the buildings downtown are, have some serious ADA compliance issues. And there are grants that come from the state of Indiana for ADA compliance. And if we looked at that as not a overarching project, but if we looked at ways that we could basically look at what is the ADA compliance that could be done and come up with a schedule or based on grants. The way I'm a shooting point guard, I think about things in long-range perspective. If we know that a grant comes up every 5 years, then okay, let's plan this out. We know this is coming this year, this is coming next year, and not wait for that time period to come. Already go ahead and prep everything we can, so we're waiting for that to action. It just basically, it's kind of like I did with my billboards. I waited till I was going to put them out 60 days early. And I said, no, people are tired of politics, so let's put them out on 30 days prior. So it's things like that that I think we could incentivize different areas of the town, and also kind of look at how the town is laid out. I mean, you could make it kind of easier or possibly better for businesses based on where they sit or how we planned out the city itself. Make it easier for them as far as tax relief, things like that. If it's a small business, maybe we do something similar to a tax abatement where the very first year we give them 100% off on their taxes, next year 90%, 80%, so on. That way the business is small, but it's had 10 years to exist and get its feet, ingrained, and therefore also develop those relationships that may stay in the city longer. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, but we've really got to broad base it and kind of pull back the blinders and look at what else could be done.
Eric, if I may,
Yep.
Jack, I heard you make a really interesting point there that I'd like to hear more about. You said you wanted to look at the city budget to offer incentives to businesses. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, that's what I would have to actually, I couldn't get into it without the mechanics, because I'd have to actually sit down with a, financial expert and look at the budget. But that's something that really we could kind of invest a little bit of time in. Maybe there is a way, talking to the business owners, that we could do something a little bit different. And that's what I'm willing to do, is work with the community, because I think we as a community, we got a lot of intelligent people in Richmond. I mean, really, and we reach out. I mean, honestly, somebody asked me about my billboard design. They say, who'd you hire to do the billboard? And nobody. It was a college student. My campaign manager's girlfriend did that. She built the website in like 2 days. I mean, really, there's so many resources in Richmond that I'm not the big brain. I have a brain trust. I have people I talk to, and a lot of them are, ex-military people, CEOs of corporations and stuff like that. But a lot of times it's just taking that solid time to sit down and think about what else could we do. It has to be more than, and the answer of, this is what we've done time and time before. If we've always do what we've always done, we're only going to get what we always had. And I've said that multiple times, that we as Richmond need to start thinking, what is the next phase? What is the next thing? And not 5 years, 10 years. Look at the economy and have that opportunity where we can kind of engage on that. But like I said, without having all the mechanics, I'm not making any promises. This is something that I'm willing to explore with the community, because ultimately I'm a public servant of what the community wants.
May I ask one more follow-up? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
You'd also brought up tax abatements, and council currently oversees the tax abatement process. Has
Absolutely.
The tax abatement committee. So are you stating that you would create an administration-driven tax abatement process, or you would propose changes to council?
Well,
for the
that's
tax abatement?
something that I would work with council with, and I'd work with business leaders on that. Previously, they had an economic vitality group, and one of the things about the economic vitality group is you had business leaders and educators that would come together and meet. And what I would like to do, we used to, and when I built bases and built up wings, we would do what we called SA&D, Strategic Alignment and Development. And basically, we'd have a vision statement, and that vision statement would guide like all the portions of the community. So if elected, I would like to reinstate that, bring people together, show them the vision statement. This is where we want to be. And that way we get that focus, health, welfare, education, drug-free Wayne County, so we're all working in an aligned strategy for the future.
I would just quickly add to that Jack is correct. The Economic Vitality Group used to meet and do exactly that. That's what Forward Wayne County is doing now. So Forward Wayne County has taken that mantle, and we have a seat at that table working with for Wayne County to do just that. So that is in motion.
So your feeling is there is not a need for the city to restart its economic vitality. And the reason I'm asking is he kind of answered a question that had been sent in by someone. So I want to give you a chance. He said he would kind of restart the
Forward
economic
Wayne County has
vitality.
really picked that up. They have regular meetings. I sit on the Forward Wayne County Steering Committee, and then there are quarterly meetings that are held with a very good number of people that show up from the community to talk about those very issues and the alignment of those resources to accomplish those goals. And so how the original Economic Vitality Committee set out is what Forward Wayne County has picked up and is moving with now.
Okay. You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're going to go to the next chat question that we had come in so we can get those. Attracting and retaining qualified employees is a continuing struggle for many of our local businesses. What would you like to see the city do to address this struggle? Aside from your desire, what would it take for you to lead and accomplish the task? And I was making notes back and forth. I think you get this one first.
Okay, sure. That is a very multifaceted question, so I'm going to try to answer that quickly.
And we'll leave it up for a little bit in
Okay,
case you
thank you.
need
Yeah,
to.
there's a lot of pieces there. So there are pieces to that that are being obtained now, and there is more work to be done. So when we talk about attraction and retention of employees, let's take a look at the EDC's annual report for 2017 and 2018. What we know is that in attraction, retention, and expansion projects, we saw just over $27 million invested in Richmond. So we know that some of the attraction, retention, and expansion projects are working, and we are seeing an influx of investment. We saw 300 new jobs created over that 2-year period. Part of that coming from Oman Casting and their expansion after they chose Richmond as their first North American facility. But what more can be done, there's absolutely more that can always be done in that vein. One of the things the city can do is not only coming back to when I was talking about the workforce resources development, but we have had several talks with our transportation division about how we could try to invigorate a work route or an education route so that it's easier for people to use public transportation to navigate to their place of work. And I think that's a very imperative role that the city can play in helping with attracting employees and retaining them so that we're breaking down one of those major barriers of transportation. It continues to be a struggle for so many working families to be able to just get to the place of work. And so we want to take a hard look at that and see if we can revamp our transportation system to at least plant a seed and start somewhere in getting people to their place of work or to the educational or workforce resources that they need so they can skill up or skill into the workplace. So that's something I think we can play a role in.
Mm-hmm. Do you need that back up a little bit?
No, I'm
Got
good.
it? Okay.
What I said, and it goes back to my platform. My platform was designed around that as for retention. Because when you talk about housing, affordable housing, and also a decent place to live. I mean, I equate it to Thanksgiving dinner. If you don't clean up the house, who's going to come over and want to stay? And we really have to look at the city in that perspective, is that people will stay if they've got a place that they enjoy to live in. The people will stay if they see that there are educational opportunities that exist. People will stay if they know that there are businesses that are supporting, and businesses and visitors will stay if they know the administration is enforcing. So I think it comes back to the code enforcement and some of the things that, especially these large organizations that own property in Richmond and expect the administration to be their local grass cutter. I really think that change, that showing that the city is focused on protecting the investments of property. Because let's face it, most business owners, that's what they're really interested in. Is my investment going to be protected? If I invest in Richmond, is that property going to be safe? Is there proper police protection? Are there vagrants hanging around it? I mean, we really have to get deep into the weeds, and not to say I would be deep in the weeds myself, but I mean, we as a community, working with the neighborhoods, working with the police and the enforcement things. I don't think that the heavy stick is what's needed all the time. You can look at enforcement as saying that's, and I know I'm off into enforcement, but I think it's relative. That if you don't have a nice place to live, why would anybody stay? And we've got to really encourage that and know that they've got their property investors. I'm a homeowner myself. I want my property to be protected, or my investment to be protected, because I've put my savings into that. That's what I want to happen. And I think that's natural for anybody. Just like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people want safety and security. And that's what we have to look at. That in itself, I think, will start that retention and retainability because it's cheaper to live here. And we have to look at the new people that live in Richmond. I met an individual the other day who lives in Richmond but is actually an editor in a Chicago paper. And with that being the case, I'm like, okay, well, why are you in Richmond? Well, honestly, it's what a lot of businesses are doing. They've got that ability that they can, connect. I tell you what I would think would be really bring retainability is fiber optic loop, not just of the downtown area, but maybe of the city. I know they just talked about the 5G processing that would come about, and some people don't want 5G because it might invade in their private lives. But however, maybe a business wants 5G processing times because, that's not your private time, then that's your business. But you've got that accessibility that you're connected with the world and faster downloading times. With today's kind of technology and looking forward, a lot of businesses and corporations, if they found that we had a faster downloading time or a premier internet service, and what would it take? Possibly, maybe we make Parallax or work with Parallax to make them an actual internet company that brings more people here. In Indianapolis did the same thing with their downtown. That's what reinvigorated their downtown, is that they started looking at those technical things. So maybe we're a whitewater instead of Silicon Valley, maybe it's Silicon Whitewater. So Silicon Gorge.
There's a follow-up that came in on Twitter. We've kind of gone through this, but I think there's been a lot of emphasis on young professionals. So I don't know what the question is. When it comes to retaining and keeping young professionals, and specifically millennials in Richmond, what can we add for fun, work? What are your ideas? So they're talking about a specific group of people which Richmond needs to keep and maintain. You get to start with this one. We'll leave that one up for a little bit.
I go back to my fun idea, and that's basically an esports center. I mean, there's a lot of people don't know this, but there are a lot of people who are actually premier game players that live in Richmond. I went out to the senior center on Friday, and there was a group of older guys that were in there, and they had the drones flying around in races. And I mean, if you took, say, for instance, Elder Member, I'll use that as a example. If you had a drone raceway with the older people teaching younger people how to fly a drone. They gave me one. I tried to fly it. That thing was impossible. But climbing walls, things like that. They would look for things to do. And I think that would be a perfect asset to the downtown community because it would be a draw. And as long as you kept it non-alcoholic, where kids could go in there, you would have kids that were, hey, let me get in the batting cage. Hey, let me climb this wall. That guy did it, I can do it too. I mean, you would start to stimulate some things like that, and it just doesn't have to be there. A lot of young people have told me, what about the nightlife in Richmond? It's not here now, and in some ways, I don't think it's not in the right place. When I came up in Richmond, Mr. G's was a big thing out at the mall. Mm-hmm. And the key thing was a lot of people came from all over from Mr. G's. But when you really think about it, the strategy of that was very similar to what we used to do with large vehicles. We didn't want them coming through the main base area. We'd want them to be out and away. And Mr. G's was perfect for that because some people don't want to hear loud music when they're in their apartments. If they're in an apartment next to the new Boswell Tap Room, maybe they don't want to hear music on a Friday, Saturday night. Maybe they want that to be their quiet space. But if we plan the city around that, I think that having more opportunities for getting out and going places, Richmond could go back to being that premier spot that everybody came to. And that was after I've had a couple of conversations with millennials, and I've got pretty much my campaign staff is full of them. But that's the fun idea that I think would attract millennials to Richmond. Smash Brothers competitions. I mean, those are the things.
How do you retain?
Yeah, I appreciate the question and how we attract and retain more millennials. And yes, that is our nation's largest demographic. However, I think it's important as mayor to focus on all age groups so that we're working to attract and retain people of all ages. Some people may choose to retire here. And some of the millennials are old enough where they're having children of their own, and we want their kids to stay here as well. So we have to look at it from a broader spectrum. And when we look at that, attraction and retention piece and that quality of life and keeping people here and keeping them happy while they're here, As mayor, it's not as efficient with your tax dollars to go fishing for things that might or might not work. We want to lean on the assets we have. And it's one of the reasons that we are investing now in the connectivity of our downtown. We've invested in Elstro Plaza. We see a thriving farmers market, Shakespeare in the Park, and live music in that area. I'm working now to bring more livability to that area because I think more people want to live in the heart of the city. We have a beautiful and thriving parks department. And so it's the assets we have in place that we need to showcase so that these are the things that are attracting people. And if we're taking care of those assets and helping them grow, then the community connects to us in that way. Plus, I would say one of the big assets we already have in our favor are our festivals. The Meltdown is drawing thousands of people from a radius around us. And when they come and we start to create that critical mass, more things start to pop up around that. So really to be efficient with the dollars at hand, it's leaning on the assets we have and focusing on trying to keep everyone here. I want all ages, all backgrounds to be welcome and happy here in our city.
Yeah. I'd like to caveat, I wasn't thinking about tax dollars to actually do some of these programs, because when you really think about it, I don't think that's the administration's role, really. I think it's a role of developers and business people that actually do that. I mean, there are realtors that just focus on specifically filling building spaces with businesses. And I think that's the actual thing. I would like to return that to the residents and the businesses. I mean, the administration, we do the infrastructure, we make sure everybody's warm, happy, that the roads are clear, free of debris, things of that nature. But I mean, as far as, I don't see the city in the role as a developer. I don't think we should be looking at tax dollars as a way of trying to improve those aspects. Now, when it goes back to, say, for instance, ADA compliance, that I agree with, but not tax dollars that go for things that I believe a developer would be more inclined to deal with.
You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11, working with our partners, the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce. I've got a few questions here, but I'm not getting to them. We've got them coming in, so as long as they're coming in from the outside, we're good. There was another Twitter question. I don't remember. Somebody out there help me out. 99% of scientists agree that climate change is real. Recently, reports show that the United States is locked into several degrees of warming. What would you do to prepare and adapt Richmond to the effects of climate change? And I don't know. I think you start this one, Jack?
Okay. I'll go for it.
Go for it.
The one thing I think about climate change is that there are basic facts, and I'm a very facts-based person. I mean, but I think we locally as a community, what we could look at is basically, and when you talk about preparation, I think we just need to be very supportive of the processes that are put into law, basically as far as emissions and things like that. But I mean, it's part of, our goal is to become 100% green at some point. Now, I know some people may think that, that means that we're going to, initially start going in and doing some kind of, radical programs to make everything change overnight. Nothing happens overnight. But the truth is that our resources are limited. Last time I looked, it said that fossil fuels will be basically 2075, way after I'm gone. But that's something that my children, or my soon-to-be grandchild, will actually be affected by. So I do think it's something that's a concern and a consideration that we have to be involved in. But I don't think it's something that we need radical changes at this point. And I know some people have said that it's radically going to change. I mean, we're already on the slope. It's, we've got to look at progressive changes that make sense and not changes that just arbitrarily kind of push for things that are unrealistic. Even right now with Richmond, I mean, our focus with the opioid crisis, we're sitting on the edge of Hamilton County and, dealing with that. That's, whether we're green or not, at this point is not really a high focus. But it is some point that we do need to look at that or start kind of the milestones of what we're doing as a community to get prepared for something like that. My kids, when they were little, they watched the Day After Tomorrow. They all got scared. Oh, is that going to happen? I said, yeah, it's probably going to happen in the next 100 years. It's not going to be in one weekend that we're going to have this complete upheaval. But right now, Richmond just really is a community, and Richmond is the people. We need that time to heal and move forward, which is I've always said it's a 10-year U-turn. Nothing happens on a dime. And we've got a lot more important things, in my opinion, that we need to start focus on. But ultimately, if elected, I'm a public servant. So it doesn't matter if I'm a Democrat. I mean, I have to represent everybody in the city, whether I like them or not, whether I agree with them or not. We have to make sure everybody has that voice. So even if, these are the things I say now, I'll ultimately, if elected, I work for the people. So we have to look at that.
Okay.
When we talk environmental sustainability, first of all, we're so fortunate to have several people in this community who are very, very passionate about environmental sustainability, and some who are experts in the field. And so we're also fortunate that those who are passionate and who are experts advise us regularly. We do have the Environmental Sustainability Commission, which regularly advises myself and council on environmental sustainability needs and resources. And we look at some of the things we're doing now and some of the things that we're planning to do in the future. So currently we have a recycling program. I think there's some expansion that could happen in that program. I'm personally a recycler. I think we all know that in my last campaign I refused the yard signs for my personal beliefs in environmental sustainability. You will see that continue through in this campaign. I don't want to throw a piece of plastic in a landfill for 500 years. Richmond Power and Light is a member of the Indiana Municipal Power Agency, who is installing more solar, which is a renewable energy resource instead of relying so much on fossil fuels. We'll have a ribbon cutting ceremony, as a matter of fact, next week on yet another solar park. And so that's really important as well. Plus, our council has heard from Environmental Sustainability Commission and those who are passionate about renewable energy resources about changing the kilowatt hours so that people find it more sustainable to have solar power at their homes. And so council wants to hear these issues as well so that we can continue to make movement in environmental sustainability. Also, we have had many conversations about how and where we can add electric charging stations for electric vehicles. We want to be welcoming to vehicles who are utilizing alternative fuels in the city, and we need to make sure that we're providing adequate charging stations for those vehicles. Last of all, I would say our landfill is very environmental sustainability conscious. They just operate on a daily basis, trying to be as efficient as they can with our landfill and with its lifespan. Our landfill will have a lifespan, and someday we will need to find new land for that. And so the more we can protect that and put less and less and less in our landfill, then the longer we'll have that asset for our city. So there are things in place now, and there are things we are talking about doing moving forward.
Okay. Thank you very much for your questions. Please keep them coming while we're waiting on a couple more questions. Let's talk about a couple of areas of the city that have come up over time. And I want to get your general perspective about what the mayor's office can specifically do in these particular areas. Some people say the West Side will benefit from the fact that Reed Health has purchased Kings Plaza. They're going to be moving in there. It will not all be off the tax rolls, but the part that they are in will. What needs to happen on the West Side? There's been a lot of conversation from residents that they feel kind of forgotten.
Are you beginning with me on this one?
I'm starting with you on that.
And it's funny that you would say some of those residents. I'm a West Sider. I'm on Northwest A. I am right next to Healthy Animals. I'm on the West Side. I rely on the commerce on the West Side. And so the property development owner over there that had that strip mall and had it up for sale for so long, he and I had many conversations about how to invigorate that growth over there. And in each of our conversations, it was a chicken and the egg conversation. He would tell me that as he would market that property to retailers, the response was, well, there doesn't seem to be a critical mass of people. And his response was, well, there won't be a critical mass until we plant something there. And they would say, well, I don't want to be the guinea pig. And so we continued in this chicken and the egg conversation. It's quite beneficial that Reed Health has decided to move into that because that brings the people. When there are people are hungry, people want to shop, people have needs, and that helps to develop the other retail pieces that need to be over there. So I'm thrilled that they're moving to the West Side, and I continue to champion for the West Side. That's my home. I'm over there as well. I'm 2 blocks away from that development. So I'm really anxious to see that come to fruition, and already the county mark across the street is open and operating. So we're seeing a little bit of that spark happening, and I think this will help push it even further.
West Side.
I think it's the same thing, in my opinion, incentivizing and looking at kind of restructuring, if you would. And it really is up to the business owners too, because strip malls are not really that high on the market of activity. So we have to really look at that as what goes in it. Also, we have to look at what facilities and what businesses are on the west side. So I think sometimes we have to look at how that's planned out and what kind of corridors are set around that area, because that can kind of give insurances to businesses that if I put a business here, this is what's going to happen with it, and I'm assured of this because of that. And I think that's what business owners are really looking for when they move into an area, is that that area is going to be protected and their investment is going to be solid. And I think that's really just what the key thing is. I mean, there's when you really look at the west side, some of the businesses have not really been that successful. So we have to look at how can we market the west side better, or some way that we can get more energy that direction. As I said, that's we can't just focus on one area of the city. We've got to look at what are other areas of the cities that might need a champion, just like the depot had. I mean, we really need those business leaders to kind of lead the charge on that. I mean, the administration can do what it can to help, but ultimately it comes back to those people that are champions that are going to take that area and take hold of it and say, hey, this is what let's form a group over here. They got a group over there. Let's get a group going and make this happen. But I mean, marketing that, working with them, doing what we can to incentivize if possible, or look at ways that that area could work better.
There was a regional stellar, did you want to jump back in? Oh. Okay. There was a regional stellar proposal for the north end, did not pass. There's been talk about what should happen there. I think even back to Mayor Hutton's administration, there was an idea. Talk about the north end and what, from a mayor's perspective, can happen in that area.
I think there's a lot of opportunity in the north end, because there are some big open spaces where they tore down Nicholson School. I mean, people have asked me about Townsend Center, and it was. Yeah, I remember it well. I used to play there. I mean, I used to hang out there on Friday nights and play basketball and everything. And but the thing is that maybe we need to look at what's next, or what's going to be new. I mean, do we need an empowerment center of some sorts? Maybe the universities, if we had a technical school, or abilities with Purdue Polytechnic to kind of inhabit a building there, where you start to work on those skills. And just like you're talking about, like Work One, for example, Work One is on the south side and the bottom of the Excel Center. Maybe we move that over there, or work with them to get to a location where people can access them and be more available. So those are things that we need to look at. Maybe even an empowerment center that gives people the ability to kind of grow and develop, and get those free courses and things that actually train them to be better. Especially with business and entrepreneurship. A lot of people have went to what they call a social entrepreneur, that we've got people that are out there working with communities to help communities get better. And I think that's just what we need on the north end. But the one thing we definitely need is, we need not just talk and planning. We need actually some definitive actions, or a milestone kind of checklist of where we're going in the future, and how is that going to be there. Like I was saying before, when we align the city under a vision statement, how does that fit in? How does the north, the west, the east, the south fit in to that map? And what can we do to make it easier for people to get jobs, have capabilities? The one thing that kind of scared me the other day, I saw where Dollar General was talking about going out of business, and if they go out of business in the north side, then that's a food desert.
That's right.
So we need to look at those.
North end.
North End has continued to be a part of the conversation, and the important role that part of our community plays in our city as a whole. So in talking about, I think Jack makes a very good point in more than just talking about it, but taking action. So tearing down the old hospital is a big part of that. That sitting dormant for so long gave people the impression that there was no longer a focus on the north side, that maybe it didn't matter, maybe that could just sit there. And we really wanted to work hard to show that it does matter, and that is an important place to us, to this entire city. And so we wanted to get that down, turn that liability into an asset, so that whatever we're developing on that site serves that north side. That's very important. In some capacity, whether it's creating a critical mass, whether it's adding commerce, it's serving and bringing people to that area. Also, we're working on the Old National Heritage Trail. That trail is about to go underway, so we're going to attract more people into Freeman Park and down the Old National Heritage Trail. That'll run parallel with 40. And also the project that we submitted into the Regional Stellar application was the Townsend Townhome and Townsend Scholar House. Townsend is, of course, a gem to our community, as is Mount Olive right across the street. And so there have been talks for a long time about trying to build this facility where we could offer housing and educational opportunities. Our housing authority will play a role in that when we get to that point, but our application was simply taking the project that we've been working on and showing the state what we've been doing, but having no intention of dropping those plans just because we weren't designated. We'll continue down that road. I've had meetings with developers who would like to build on the Leland-Nicholson site and help us achieve that goal and that dream of offering the Townsend Townhomes and Townsend Scholar House. We haven't been able to align yet, but we're going to continue down that road and try to see that goal to fruition.
And lastly, the one that you both have talked about, you all say it's the heartbeat of the city. It's going through some rough times, even though the construction may be done near the end of this year. Even beyond the construction, Center City needs something. From a mayor's perspective, what does it need?
Center City needs, right now we need a downtown champion. That's very, very important. We had started to build the groundwork with the Center City Development Director, and then unfortunately there was a parting of ways there. And so we really need that person that's downtown and advocating and being that champion for downtown. As we progress through that, I've tried to build connections and relationships with the downtown businesses. When we look at some of those that have left, Elder Beerman was something we had no control over. And when we're talking about such bakeries such as Joyanne, we've had countless meetings with the owner of Joyanne trying to help with small business development and help in any way that we can to reinvigorate that, to help them and give them the business assistance they need, while investing the $11,000 a year in the marketing plan, talking with just the different owners, and then developing a community development coordinator position who is now being overseen by Kate Barber. She's meeting regularly with the downtown business owners and the depot business owners. So we're trying to do our part to get that infrastructure shored up, provide the connectivity. What I would like to see in the future is us playing a stronger role in stabilizing some of the buildings to open up the entrepreneurial pipeline, so that we make it easier for entrepreneurs of all ages who have items that they want to bring to market there in downtown. We need to open that pipeline to them. So that's very important to me. And that's something that I want to continue working on. We haven't been able to get there yet, but given the opportunity, that's what we're going to start transitioning into, is offering more livability options and opening that entrepreneurial pipeline.
With the downtown, and I've actually put some focus in that, because the thing is, I think a lot of the business owners have not realized some of the additional capabilities. Even with the Stellar, there was no pro forma done for the second level housing. And we've got a lot of properties down there that you see these boarded up second levels and third levels that are not being attended to. And when you board them up, I mean, honestly, that's just a mold factory. So with that being the case, I mean, we just need to start looking at what we can do to get that resolved.
Couple of follow-ups that came in as chat questions. Even I had kind of developed that question, then we got a couple of follow-ups. So let's go with the first one of those. It's okay. The Bradford Building at 12th and East Main is just one example of the deteriorating buildings held by absentee owners and slumlords. What will your administration do to hold these people accountable and continue to clear the blight that exists in this community? Jack, I think you get this one first.
Yeah. Well, I'll just add that into what I was talking about with the downtown as well, because you're absolutely right. The Bradford Building comes right down into the downtown area. And I really would look at, taking legal action, and it's whether it's safety, basically, and you would look at the Bradford Building. I'm from a construction background, so, just like the bricks falling off the wall there, when you go down to the Tivoli, you've got the same thing happening there. You might not see it, but if you stand on the other side of the street, you're going to see this white line around from the hole in the roof. That water is seeping into that wall, and pretty soon those bricks are going to start coming off of there. So we do need to fix those buildings, but some of the things that we could do is aggressively go after these people who do not live in Richmond. I mean, quite honestly, that's something, and other cities have done it. Newcastle did it with their downtown to go after people. I actually had talked to the city's attorney about some of the processes for getting that done early last year. But that's one of the processes that, if elected, that I would actually really go after, because I think that it's criminal. And the city of Richmond should not have to deal with people that are doing criminal actions. We're not the landlords to mow the grass and take care of the people, or take care of the buildings for them. But we're here to take care of the people and the residents and the investors that invest in properties. And if we showed that initiative to go after these big guys that are holding buildings for all this time, I think that would be something that, the investors would respect, that, hey, they just really just took after that building is no longer theirs no more. And if it's done, then we knock it down. If it's not done, then we see what we can do. Maybe it does become affordable housing, or even on the main thoroughfares, maybe it becomes market rate housing. But we've got to look at that from every kind of angle of how to take their control back from them, because that's the blight of our city. Is not the residents. People of Richmond love Richmond. There are people outside of Richmond that thought they were going to make money by buying a property for a low cost and letting it just rot. And honestly, being an old home owner, you can't do that. You're not going to make money. I literally do drywall and do all my own woodwork in my house because I'm making sure that I take care of that property, because it's a history that shouldn't go away. And that's what I would do, is basically be very hard after those bad actors.
So what we have when we talk about the Bradford is an isolated issue that's indicative of a much larger problem. We have blighted buildings around the city. We've navigated through the blight elimination project and tried to take some of these down. We've taken about 200 blighted buildings down through the blight elimination project, and we still have a little bit of funding and a little more room to go on that one. But when we talk about taking concrete steps in dealing with this issue, this is exactly why last year in the budget session and working with council, we created the Code Enforcement Department, and we now have a Chief Code Enforcement Officer. Now, what's really important to talk about when we talk about code enforcement and our Chief Code Enforcement Officer, Derek Hill, as our new Chief Code Enforcement Officer, will work from the legislation that we are right now working to codify to take to council, and that will be his playbook to work from. What's really important to understand is we will never create legislation that targets any one specific group. I appreciate that we do in fact have some people that live out of state that don't take care of their properties. We have people that live here as well that don't. And we have people that live out of state that do take care of their properties, and some that live here that take very good care. And so we have to make sure that the legislation that we create that acts as the playbook for our Code Enforcement Department serves the entire community equally and is not trying to pinpoint any specific group or any specific kind of building owner. So with the Code Enforcement Department, we are taking a much firmer stance on dilapidated buildings, overgrown lawns, the trash that's being dumped, and you're seeing that in action right now. As a matter of fact, as I pinpoint it back down to the Bradford, it's a shame that that beautiful old building was left to deteriorate to the condition it is now. And I've said this in 2 State of the City addresses. Eric, right here in the studio, I've said, you're not going to get away with it anymore. That's why we were creating the Code Enforcement Department. So we have now boarded up the front door of the Bradford, and we are issuing the violations to the property owner and saying it's time. It's time to fix this up, or the legal action is following with heavier teeth, heavier fines, and a shorter timeline. You'll see a board on front of the building right now. And that goes for the whole city. It's not as though our laser focus is on that one building. It's a shame where that building is, but it's indicative of a larger problem that, as mayor, I have to look over the entire city. And that's really, really important that we take care of everything. With the legislation we create, and we're making an almost $1 million investment in code enforcement, they need to be able to do that citywide. And very passionate about that.
Okay. We are under 30 minutes to go, closing in on closer to 20. So we're going to bring your 2.5 minutes down to about 90 seconds for your answers. There is one more follow-up to the kind of downtown area that came in that I want to get to those, and then we've gotten a couple of other questions from Twitter. So do you believe the revitalization of Main Street needs to include an overlay district, and should this district prohibit additional 501c3 organizations from owning property in this district, or at least making it necessary for them to keep their properties on the tax rolls? I think you get the start on this one.
So in creating an overlay in Main Street that deals with nonprofits, and we have nonprofits in our downtown business area right now. They already exist. If you have a 501c3 designation, it's a federal designation. We've talked about this several times here in the studio. We can create overlays and we can create deed restrictions, but it's a federal protection. So the mayor can ask for a payment in lieu of taxes, but then you can also go into a battle over whether or not that has to be seen through. Do I believe that we need to put an overlay over downtown in order to block future 501c3s? I think that's a very hard and far-sweeping move that I think might be unnecessary. I think it's more important to have a downtown champion that fosters the growth correctly, because community resources and nonprofits are absolutely a part of a thriving community. What would a community be without the nonprofit resources that help people in ways of advocacy and learning and community gathering? So we never want to put a hard fist down as a city and try to block that from the heart of our city, but instead having our downtown champion in place and having proper planning and going through our Richmond Rising 10-year plan and hearing from the community and saying, how do we want to grow in the next 10 years? What resources do we need downtown? Funneling that through our Center City champion, our downtown champion, so that we know how we want to see that grow and helping to foster that growth. And I think that's a much smarter way to approach helping to foster our nonprofit community rather than shut them out of an area of our city altogether. I don't think that's conducive to community growth.
Okay.
I would say that I'd go with the community actually, and I'd need to talk to more than just one person, because I'm sure that this, and empathizing, I understand people's concern, especially in the downtown area. Actually, when I was in the department as director of infrastructure, I dealt with a lot of these phone calls over this, especially when the Rock Solid Ministry started with the women's shelter next door. We had a lot of conversations, a lot of information with that. But I do think that the city can be planned out. I don't rule things out because I can't say it's that this is what the city wants. But I would rather be, make sure that we have good, open public discussion with all the business owners to know. Because I think that business owners, you've got to have a communication strategy that is asymmetric. That everybody kind of understands exactly kind of where that fits in. And I think that you can't just blindly throw down an overlay. However, I wouldn't rule out an overlay if that's what works best for the community. But it has to work best for the community, because what's more important is Richmond, not what Wayne County wants, not what people external to Richmond want, but what's important to Richmond. And I think that's important, is what the community wants. An overlay, I understand the purposes of them, and I think there are ways that you could make it more restrictive, but I think it still ultimately comes back to public discussion on that issue, because it was very contentious. And I think, especially when I talk about communication, if elected, one thing I would like to do is that with the Common Council, with the Board of Works, people get a very short time period to talk. But I would like to open up an extra day or time period that they could actually sit down, and maybe it's just me, maybe the affected council member, to actually give them that time to speak their piece.
Okay. We're going to keep you to a tight 90 seconds. I'm told that we've got at least 4, maybe 5 questions that have come in from Twitter that we're going to try to get in the next 20 minutes. So, Ryan, help me out. Does either candidate plan to bring back the local Civil Rights Commission, which would be, I assume, the Human Rights Commission? And if so, what is their specific strategy to do so? Jack, I think you start this one.
Okay. The Human Rights Commission, actually, I understand that there are some concerns with it. A lot of people associate it with just that it only affects one person or one set of group of persons. However, because I've seen conversation online, people, full-blown arguments about this particular situation. But the thing is that I would look to get it back, because right now the process is that people believe it can just go to Indianapolis, they can take it. But Indianapolis is not Richmond, and I think our community kind of focus needs to be on Richmond. I also think it shouldn't be anything anyone is scared of, because it also affects people that are homeowners or renting from a landlord. There's ways, and it's not just for a specific group, it's for everybody. And as long as we treat it with the right respect, get the right people on the commission. I think it's something that could work, but it's a strategy that we would have to look at how that came about. But ultimately, I would really get a lot of public input on that.
So the short answer for me is absolutely. The Human Rights Commission needs to be rebuilt. It needs to exist again under a different structure. This is what I campaigned on originally in 2015. And it's something that I wanted to get on right away in getting into office, but serving as mayor and what I've learned in that office, because there is just a lot to learn and a lot to take on once you're actually in the office. We had other issues that we had to deal with before there could be a sustainable method to get this commission working again so that it can be sustainable and keep moving. If a knee-jerk reaction is taken, then there's no sustainability in this commission moving forward. So this is going to take the work of budgeting from the executive branch of government, myself, and working with council, because it's going to have to be part of the budget process. The mayor has appointments to the commission, as does council. So it has to be a partnership, and it has to be built in a way that can be met from both sides. When the Human Rights Commission was originally decommissioned, $40,000 was removed from the budget line item, and that effectively ended the ability of the Human Rights Commission to function. We have not been able to allocate that $40,000 back, and my original plan in starting off as mayor was finding other community organizers that could put into that. I've since decided perhaps we can start at a smaller level and put a seed to that and begin the growth of that newly reformed. When I say newly reformed, I want to talk about that a little bit more. And looking back at the former Human Rights Commission, I appreciate all the work that went into that from everyone that served in that capacity. I do think one of the issues that came forward was a heavy lean on the litigation that came out of the commission. I think we need to rebrand that commission, and that will be my goal, is to do so, to focus more on education, mediation, and training. And if we start that way, the decisions we have to make are, if there's going to be a director of the commission, does that director get paid at a full-time or a part-time capacity? And then what training dollars are needed for that commission to function? And so putting together maybe an exploratory group that can help me set that budget so that we can take that to council, put that seed in place, and get that train moving in the right direction. But it's vital that it's done in a sustainable way and not in a knee-jerk way that it won't be there in 2 more years. That's what's important.
Okay. Ryan, you're up. Richmond Fire Department recently asked state legislators for help with attracting more freighters at firefighters, okay, as they have spots open. What are your plans for getting more firefighters? I'm not sure the mayor can do that, but how do you help?
Sure, it's a great question. So when I first started as mayor, going back to my beginning, one of the things that I heard from young men and women who are interested in joining the fire department was it seemed to have a preference to those who already had training. So I was out talking to a local group on the south side of Richmond, and they said to me, if you want to be a firefighter, then you're expected to have a background or a training in this, and unless you've grown up in it or been a volunteer firefighter elsewhere, how are you supposed to have that training? So we knocked down that barrier. We now pay for and provide the training. So we have set out to provide the training, open that pathway, and even more importantly, to work with the NAACP on the Dory initiative so that not only in our police department, but in our fire department, we are adding more diversity to both police and fire. So that's been important to us from day one of me taking office. And is it difficult? Absolutely it's difficult. A lot of young people see working as a firefighter as a lifelong career. And sometimes they think, well, what if I want to do multiple things in life? And so sometimes it's just education that you can do other things while you're working for the fire department. You can go to school and get education and other things. So we're continuing those recruitment efforts, and we're continuing to work to diversify, and we're knocking down those barriers by providing the training opportunities from within the department.
Yeah. What I would look at is actually the internships that could develop, especially in the high school. The Dory project is one part, but I think we could actually kind of facilitate. Not everybody is designed to go to college, and not everybody wants to go to college. I think that was one of the things at the time. I was all fire and wheels when I was young. I wanted to join the military and go out and do things. And I think that providing those internships, providing those avenues, especially for our high school students or people that have the initiative or people that just might have the desire to get into those programs is very important. So marketing in a different way is kind of that process as well, making sure that the people who are eligible or know kind of what that pathway is all the way through. So I think there's definitely a marketing strategy to it, and I think it's a valued part of our community that we need to inculcate as a continuing process. Education never stops, and even if they become a firefighter, they have to look at what their next kind of venue is or where their next position is. It's just, you have to think of that. You can't think of, I'm going to do this job for the rest of my life, because honestly, the life doesn't work that way anymore. Look at me, I retired after almost 30 years of service, and I'm still out here working, doing things, because we don't die at 40 anymore. So people, especially young people, have to really look at possibly having more than one educational experience in their lifetime or job related experience in their lifetime. So they've got to look at that. What is my, I might be a firefighter now, but what's my next initiative? As I get older, I can't move as fast. What is my next goal? And that's what I think is really important, especially for young people, that they look at and have that pathway to guide them through life.
You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're working with the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce. Answering your questions is Jack Cruse, Dave Snow. Next question up is, would you pursue the food and beverage tax? And if so, how would you suggest we use those dollars? Would you pursue the food and beverage tax, and how would you suggest we use those dollars? Jack, I believe you start.
That's one, and I was actually asked this question. I was out at Joanne's Cafe, and somebody asked me that question. But basically, I said that right now, and just looking at the way the city looks right now, if it was, first I'd like to get, more talks with the community to make sure it's something that the businesses and everybody kind of at least seeing common ground on what was going on, and that way we could better look at the use of the dollars. If it was left up to me, I would focus on the roads, because in my campaigning running around the city of Richmond, I've noticed there's a lot of back roads and things like that, and literally, I mean, even on roads that are near my house where I've got to literally cross the street to avoid potholes. I think that, putting that money back into the roads is actually, I think, a primary thing. I think that's also an attractive thing to people who want to stay in Richmond or want to come to Richmond, because if they know that they're not going to take road damage or have to replace a tire, that is very important to people, is what kind of roads do we have in Richmond. If we've got premier roads, I think that would bring more traffic, that bring more people that would want to come here and live in Richmond, because they've got nice houses, nice roads, places to live.
Yes, I am in favor of the food and beverage tax. We've discussed this before in the studio, and we've been working on a plan. I'm not ready yet to lay that plan out in detail, but we've been working on a plan to present that food and beverage tax. I would say that plan does not include roads. I think it's quite evident that there's an investment being made in our roads and streets. We're seeing a huge investment from the state of Indiana in our main thoroughfares in 27 and 40, and we're applying to the state for matching dollars for motor vehicle highway funds. It's one of the things in my opening comments. I said in 2015 when I campaigned, regularly people asked me, what are you going to do about these roads? And I said, if elected mayor, I'm going to fix them. Today, I often get people who are under construction fatigue, as am I. I feel the pinch every bit as much as you do. And so we are fixing the roads. We are investing in the roads. And if we were going to leverage a new tax, it's not an infrastructure tax. We're fixing our roads. So I think we can put together a more robust plan of how we best serve the community if, in fact, we were going to implement a food and beverage tax. Now, here's the important thing to understand about this. You're asking this question of the mayoral candidates, but it is not a decision of the executive branch of government. The mayor does not decide whether we have a food and beverage tax. The mayor can work and bring other people to work on a plan, but then that has to be presented to council, and that will be a decision of our city council. And so it's going to take teamwork and compromise if that is indeed where we're going to go.
Okay. We are under 10 minutes, 3 questions left to go. Let's see if we can make this work. Area businesses would like to be able to see more transparency with meetings happening during the work day. If you win, will you commit to allowing for more coverage on WCTV or web streaming?
I love this question because every question has been geared about how we will work harder. This one's about how you're going to get to work harder after the election, Eric.
Thanks. Whoever sent that one in, thanks.
Who are you starting with on this one? I've lost track.
You start with
Okay.
this one.
We do our best to hold public session meetings, and it's one of the reasons that I worked so hard in the budget process to implement the new community development coordinator. Kate Barber is at the helm of that position now, making regular updates to council on projects at hand. We now have a huge repository on our city webpage of the projects that are going on. We've put some signage around downtown during the construction, worked on maps. We're trying to channel this out. We're putting it onto social media. We've put out more press releases. And so we're channeling that information out to the community as heavy as we can. I had a gentleman that called me and said, I missed the Richmond Rising planning meeting because I didn't hear about it. And I wish it had been in the PAL item. And so I quickly pulled up my computer, went to palitem.com, and I said, well, here's the date of the article. We did do a press release. And he said, oh, I missed that. And I continue to hear that from citizens who say, I didn't know about that, and I wish I had known. And I continue to ask them, how do you gather your information? We continue to deal with a more and more fragmented audience who's gathering their information from so many different places. We're trying to hit it on social media streams. We're putting out the press releases. We're putting it on the website. And we'll continue to add to that as much as we need to try to get the information out. I lost my train of thought there. We're going back to, sorry, I'm supposed to be at 90 seconds. I went way off base there. My apologies.
That's okay. You're at 120. You're good.
Okay.
Transparency in government. How do you use us more or better?
I actually agree with 100%. And I say, as I always say, vote for transparency is a vote for Jack Cruse. But especially like the live streaming, I think there are so many facets of communications. I attended the marketing. I think you were in the same thing about not all your eggs in one basket. And that's really what I call asymmetric warfare, or now I call it asymmetric campaigning, where you've got multiple levels. I'd actually would like to see, because somebody asked me that, why don't we see the finance committee? It goes away from the council, and we never get to see what the finance committee, and it might be boring, but I mean, almost a Richmond C-SPAN, I think, would be something that would be very kind of, not formatted, not kind of professional, but it's just plain, and people know that, hey, this is being worked on, this is what they talked about. So you could look at things like that, but there's other things that you could involve the community to, because one thing I noticed with community, and this is just, you see these pages pop up of Speak Out Richmond, Talk About It Richmond, they start popping up because people sometimes don't feel like they have a voice. So I would be in favor of maybe even, because Palladium Item, they do a good job, but they're not actually in Richmond as much as they were when I grew up. But I'm in favor of, even if we had a localized individual contributions from donated contributions of articles from people in the city, where people kind of get that connectivity that we're working together. Hey, somebody wrote this article, they're an editor, they live at home, they, volunteered that time. So I think that's something we can work with the community and communicate at every single level. So I am in favor of it.
Food and beverage tax money can come back to WCTV.
I would just chime in that Jack had mentioned Finance Committee being boring. It may seem boring from the outside, but Finance Committee is by no means boring. It's an essential function to doing the business of the city, and so it's a very invigorating and thoughtful process where a lot of due diligence goes into the financial decisions that are made for the city.
I'd like the caveat, I wasn't saying it was actually boring, but I think some people find C-SPAN boring, but that's what it would be, basically showing everything's going on, because some people would really like to see those conversations as well.
I have no doubt that if it were able to be shown, people would watch.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that.
Absolutely.
We do have another question that came in from Twitter, so want to try to get as many. With this being the Democrat Party primary, have you accepted large donations from any Republican PACs or Republican donors?
I'll answer this one because actually I got it at the Democratic meeting last night, and I
Oh,
want
you
you
did?
to yeah.
Okay.
But you can point the camera directly at me. I got approval of my wife to spend X amount of dollars before we started. We haven't got any large donations. We got one large donation, and it was, somebody who just basically, and they were Democratic. There was no Republicans involved whatsoever. Somebody asked me that question: how did I get billboards up so quickly? Planning and strategy. That's all it comes back to. If you plan things out, I talked to Richie Peterson. Hey, when do they go up? What do they cost? Where do they need to place? What has the highest immersion rate? And then, basically I just looked at what can I do? And I actually did ask somebody, can I swap places with you? And the reason I said, can I swap places? Because they had a higher immersion rate. And honestly, just realistically, if I'm going to run for the top office in the city, why would I not use a strategy and negotiate whatever I could to get things? But if you look at it that perspective, that's how I would work for the city of Richmond. I would look at throughout the state, how can we best benefit Richmond? How can I best benefit the people who live here? So the way I lead my life is very frugal. I came up with, and I had, let my wife know we're going to get X number of signs, we're going to get X number of billboards, we're going to get X number of business cards, and we're going that route. And my campaign staff, oh, we need to do this too. Nope. My CFO has spoken.
You're done.
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I intend to run a lean and mean campaign just as I did last time. Am I supported by any kind of political action committee? Absolutely not. Have we received any major sizable donations? Not to this point, but the important part is we talked about transparency a few minutes ago. We have reporting on Monday for our primary fundraising, so you'll be able to see that in the very near future. So if you have any concerns about fundraising from either candidate, I just encourage you to look at the finance reports of each candidate.
And those are available on the clerk's website.
I believe so.
Yes, so check those out. Dave Snow, Jack Cruse, thank you both very much. It has been a fast-moving 90 minutes. I appreciate you, both of you, taking the time to be here and answer questions. I think I hear, although you all are supposed to be together in a debate format next Wednesday night.
Yes.
Where? What time?
It's going to be at the Graph Center at, I believe, Ivy Tech. IU East. Benito Washington Lacey is going to be the moderator, and it'll be at 6:30.
Okay. So.
And the public is invited. They have a limited amount of seating, but the public is invited to that event.
Okay, so wanted to give that a little bit of publicity. Want to remind you this is the primary election. Voting, absentee voting has already begun. Voter registration, 301 East Main Street, Monday 8:30 till 5, Tuesday through Friday 8:30 to 4:30, Saturday April 27th and May 4th, 9 until, now this is 9 to 4. We have one later, this is 9 to 3, so we have to check that out. April 29th through May 3rd, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Coleman Center and First English Lutheran Church, the Coleman Center, 10 to 3, Saturday, April 27th and May 4th. And then on Election Day, May 7th, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., the Coleman Center, First English Lutheran Church, Mount Olive Baptist Church, and First Baptist Church. We will be on the air that evening beginning at 6, and it's going to be a short night, so we expect maybe an hour and a half. Thank you very much for watching this edition of the InFocus Candidate Forum. Thanks to our partners, the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce, for helping us out. Replays of this begin at 10:30 this evening and will be available on our video on demand site. Have a great weekend.
Keep up with local government information and shows with WGTV Online. Go to WCTV.info and click on the WGTV Online button. It's a live stream and video on demand site in one. Click the play button, you'll see whatever's on the air on WGTV Channel 11, or scroll down for videos on demand. Choose whatever meeting or show you'd like to watch. It's easy to stay informed with WGTV Online, a service of Whitewater Community Television.
You are watching Whitewater Government Television, Channel 11.
Keep up with local government information and shows with WGTV Online. Go to WCTV.info and click on the